The HYUNDAI i10 has for some time now been a benchmark in the growing city car segment, offering a clever, space-efficient design with 5 doors, where many similarly priced rivals would offer 3. With running costs now also up amongst the class leaders in this improved version, it's easy to see why it remains such a popular choice in its segment. You might be surprised to find that this model, HYUNDAI's i10, is one of this country's very best-selling city cars. With the original version, that was mainly down to affordable pricing. With this Mark II design though, this Korean contender is aiming to claim its place in the nation's affections on merit. It's still very good value, mind, and still spacious and versatile too, these being the 3 elements that buyers prioritise in the market's smaller segment, one of the very few in which you can expect the sales leader to also be the best car. Buyers in search of an urban runabout, you see, can't be bothered with the snobby image issues that restrict HYUNDAI sales in larger market categories. Which means that the Korean brand has a real opportunity for sales growth when it comes to vehicles like this, one that the company has grabbed with both hands over the last decade. True, its early city car efforts, the curiously quirky Atos of 1998 and the Postman Pat-like Amica that almost immediately replaced it, were better suited to Far Eastern tastes than European ones. But by 2008, HYUNDAI was getting the hang of what Western families were looking for, bringing us an i10 model that offered super mini style in a smaller, cheaper, more agile and more versatile package than anything we'd seen before. Sales took off, boosted in the UK by the government's scrappage scheme, and across Europe, nearly 500,000 i10s found happy homes. Fast forward to 2013 though, and HYUNDAI's headaches were increasing. Despite a 2011 facelift, the original version of this car was struggling as mainstream brands piled into the city car segment, led by the design we know either as a Volkswagen Up, a Skoda Citigo or a Seat Mii. With Fiat also revitalising its offerings, and Citroën, Peugeot and Toyota about to do so too, an all-new i10 was needed, a model that would need to represent as big a step forward as its predecessor managed. Is this that car? Let's find out. There are a few things that you want to tick off as soon as you get yourself seated behind the wheel of a good city car. The first is visibility. If you're going to be jinking from lane to lane, you need great all-round sightlines. This i10 scores well in that regard, with good mirrors, windscreen pillars that aren't too obtrusive, and a fairly high seat height. Point 2, steering. If there's one thing that instantly takes the shine off a city car, it's a heavy, unresponsive feel at the helm. The i10's rack is quick, accurate and very light. And the third thing you need to look for is a small turning circle. And as you can see, the i10 certainly answers that call. The 9.56 metre turning circle requires fewer than 3 turns of the wheel lock to lock. So if you spot a parking space on the other side of the road and check it's all clear, you'll find that this i10 can dive in quicker than just about anything I've driven. It's brilliant. Another area where this HYUNDAI steals a march on some of its rivals is in offering a choice of engines. Many city car ranges come with just one power plant and then a whole multitude of trim levels to disguise that fact. This i10 is available with both 3 and 4 cylinder units, respectively 1 litre or 1.2 litres in size, offering a choice of either 66 or 87 PS outputs. As you might expect in this corner of the market, we're talking petrol power in both cases. Most car makers long ago twigged that budget buyers in this segment don't want to pay the extra for a diesel engine that won't financially justify itself over the limited urban mileages likely to be covered. Often I'll recommend going for a bigger power plant in modestly powered cars of this sort, but not in this case. There's a lot to be said for the 66 PS 1 litre unit. It's of course lighter than the 87 PS 1.2, yet virtually as quick for town driving. It even makes quite a pleasant noise. Of course, put it on a test track under the unyielding scrutiny of some data logging performance monitors, and the 14.9 second sprint to 62 miles an hour doesn't appear that impressive, and the 96 mile an hour top speed isn't going to get it onto the cover of Evo magazine. Trust me though, it feels quite sprightly enough when it's in its city element. The 1.2 litre engine is a tad faster, but as I've suggested, the difference is marginal. HYUNDAI tells me it'll get to 62 miles an hour in 12.3 seconds and top out at 106 miles an hour. In other words, a level of incremental performance that to me seems fairly academic. But we're getting off the point here. The i10's never been about straight line go. Don't take that as meaning that it's a dull drive. Ford's original KA was a tiny urban runabout that sold for years, largely on the basis that it had very little power, but was great fun to pedal about in. And this i10 has enough about it to offer keener drivers a bit of fun behind the wheel. The key to this is its suspension. There's actually nothing particularly clever in its basic setup. You get a pair of struts up front and a torsion beam rear end, but as is always the case with these things, it's the details that count, and there's a reasonable degree of suppleness to the ride that irons out the worst city streets can throw at it. That's the easy part. Combining that with decent body control when you're pushing on a little bit harder is an altogether tougher ask, but credit where credit's due to the chassis engineers at HYUNDAI's German engineering centre. Thanks to this Mark II i10 stiffer chassis and lower centre of gravity, turn-in is crisp, although the downside of that effortless steering is that there's not a great deal of detailed feedback at speed. It's not notably worse than many of its key rivals in that regard, though. The other minor issue I'd raise is that it's not the quietest car at speed, although criticising a tiny city car for its high-speed refinement feels a bit like quibbling about how poor a Lamborghini is for a visit to IKEA. To be fair, HYUNDAI's actually put quite a bit of work into reducing noise, vibration and harshness. So, to that end, this i10 gets beefier hydraulic mountings for the engine, a triple-layered dashboard bulkhead with a sound-deadening panel, dual door sealing strips, and two measures to reduce wind noise. First, a redesign of the door mirror mounts, and a move of the radio antenna further towards the back end of the roof. The Koreans claim that at 65 decibels on rough surfaces, this car is quieter than key rivals, and at lower speeds you could argue that. Get on a motorway though, and you'll find quite a prevalent hum in the cabin at around 70 miles an hour. I've no issue though with the quality of the manual gear shift action. It's light, crisp, and feels like work has gone into matching the consistency of weighting of clutch and gear stick movement. HYUNDAI has also made the brake pedal action very light, so do bear that in mind if you're getting into the car for the first time. I suspect quite a few dealer sales staff are going to end up hanging from their seatbelts at the first traffic light that they come to. Gently does it is the best advice when you first come to use the strongly servoed middle pedal. The big draw for some, possibly older, buyers is the fact that the 1.2 litre variant can be specified with 4-speed automatic transmission. Choose the auto for effortless city driving by all means, but bear in mind that it does make the car slower and thirstier than the 1.2 litre manual and hikes the carbon dioxide rating up quite significantly. Personally, I'd stick with 3 pedals and keep a bit of money in my pocket. There used to be only 2 ways you could style a city car. One was the small and cute approach, championed by models like the Fiat 500. The other represented the more versatile and practical option promised by contenders like the original version of this i10. In the last few years, though, the waters have been muddied here. The 2011 Volkswagen Up Skoda Citigo Seat Me design, proving that style in this segment could be practical and practicality could be stylish. The bar had been raised, and for this second generation i10, Hyundai's penmen realised that they'd need to bring us more than just another short, tall, practical little runabout. To be fair, they knew that anyway. Smart design already the #1 reason for the company's increasing market share, with models across its range shaped by a flowing, so-called fluidic sculpture styling philosophy that now continues here. Does it work? You be the judge. It's certainly a step forward from the sensible boxiness of the original version, though stops a little short when it comes to ultimate city chic. In part, that's due to Hyundai's preference for this to be practical transport rather than just another urban trinket, which perhaps explains why this is now the longest car in its segment at nearly 3.7 metres. That gets it to within 20 centimetres of supposedly much larger Fiesta-shaped Super Mini, which is not to imply this car to be lacking the kind of individuality now so important in this segment. On the contrary, in fact. Take the front end, where you get the sort of big trapezoidal air intake that would normally be found on a sports coupe, and complex smeared back headlight units that flow into a sharper side moulding designed to give the profile of this design a bit more shape, aided by a blade-like swage line that runs through the door handles. The rear section's quite smart too, with neatly integrated tail lamps that bite into a rear tailgate that raises to reveal one of the largest trunk openings in the segment, and a 252-litre total boot capacity that's one of the very biggest in the class, 10% larger than before and easily enough to equal the Volkswagen Up and its design clones. Now again, we're veering into Super Mini territory here. That figure just 10% less than you get in a Ford Fiesta, and more pertinently around 50% more than you get in a Toyota Aygo, a Citroën C1 or a Peugeot 108. One of the reasons the cargo area is so big is that there's no spare wheel as standard, just a mobility kit. But Hyundai will only charge you £50 extra if, as I would, you want the added security of a space saver spare. These rear seats split and fold, but there's not a totally flat boot floor, which means loading heavier items in is a bit trickier. Still, it's hard to grumble with the 1,046 litres of available space on offer. Of course, whenever you get a decently sized boot in a car this small, there's always the fear that rear seat passengers will pay the price for it. Especially in this case, where most of this model's exterior length increase has been swallowed up by the need for an increased front overhang to meet pedestrian impact legislation. In fact, once you've entered through the wide opening doors, you'll find a decent level of roominess for this class of car, provided you stick with the carriage of just a couple of adults. True, this sharply rising window line might not prove popular with very small children, but they won't complain about the legroom on offer. Even with a couple of 6-footers installed back here, front seat occupants shouldn't have to compromise space to accommodate them. I'd also point out that unless you go for the frugal Blue Drive Model 110 variant, 3 belts are provided back here. You only get 2 in many other city cars, which would be seriously annoying for family folk with 3 kids. People like me, which is why I'd find that feature to be a key buying incentive. And up front, well, it feels spacious here too, with head and elbow room also plentiful by class standards. It's pretty easy to find a comfortable driving position too, despite the fact that the wheel only adjusts for height, not for reach. You'll find it a bit annoying though that you can't adjust the seat height without opening the driver's door. The dashboard is as logically laid out as you'd expect from a Hyundai, and while some of the plastics are a long way from the fashionable soft-feeling materials that some brands provide, you know what? It doesn't really matter in a car like this. Do you really want to be introducing the weight of a huge slush-moulded fascia into a city car? Exactly. Anyway, the key touch points seem pretty nicely fabricated to me, with the steering wheel, gear lever and buttons on the dash functioning with greater quality than you'd normally have any right to expect at this price point. In fact, there's an uncannily Germanic feel to them, which isn't surprising when you remember that the fatherland is actually where this car was designed. Alright, so you could still argue that the overall style of this interior isn't perhaps quite as slick as you'd find in, say, a Volkswagen Up, but it's not far off. It would be nice to have the kind of colour infotainment touchscreen you get in this i10's latest city car rivals, though. The simple dot matrix display offered here is clear enough, but a little old tech. Still, the important stuff's been carefully thought through. Cabin practicality, for example, which is why you get a huge cubby in front of the gear lever and a glove box big enough to hold something other than just the owner's manual and a packet of polos. There are well-sized door bins too, big enough at the front to hold a proper 1.5 litre bottle of water or a 0.6 litre bottle if you're seated at the rear. And you get a couple of cup holders just in front of the handbrake here, as well as a coin tray. This Hyundai is certainly affordable. After all, you'll only be paying somewhere between £8,500 and £10,500 for your i10, and all variants come with 5 doors. This normally an extra cost option, where it's offered at all in this segment. As with this model's Kia Picanto design stablemate, there's a choice of 1 litre or 1.2 litre petrol units, offering either 66 or 87 PS. Most buyers going for the very cheapest 1 litre version will want to consider the £650 option of air conditioning. Customers able to stretch to a budget of just over £9,000 can look to mid-range SE spec and enjoy a much wider range of choices. There's the option of paying a £300 premium to get the 1 litre engine in cleaner, more frugal blue drive form. Or if you find a £500 premium, you can graduate from 1 litre to 1.2 litre power. For those that do go for this 1.2, there's the further alternative of an automatic gearbox for a premium of just under £600. So, what kind of value proposition are we talking about here? A pretty good one. Even real bargain basement brand models like Suzuki's Alto and Dacia's Sandero won't cost you much less than a comparable i10 when fitted with the air conditioning most buyers will want. And another supposedly cheap option in this sector, the MG3, will actually cost you slightly more if you get one with a properly cooled cabin. You might think a Fiat Panda would be cheaper than this HYUNDAI i10, but even without air conditioning, it's actually more expensive, especially in the twin air guise you'd need to match the performance of a pokier i10. You'd think the closest rival to this car, though, would be the Kia Picanto that's so similar underneath. Sure enough, the two models are similarly priced in 1 litre form, but the Kia is quite a bit more expensive if you want the 1.2 litre engine. Probably this i10's toughest competition, though, comes from base versions of the Seat Mii and the Skoda Citigo. Again, like the Picanto, these two are comparably priced to this Hyundai in entry-level 1 litre form, but will cost significantly more if you upgrade to a pokier power plant that'll match the performance of the 1.2 litre i10 I have here. Even pricier is the other version of the Seat Skoda joint design, Volkswagen's Up. The other key badge engineered design this Hyundai must take on in this city car segment is that we know as either a Citroën C1, a Peugeot 108 or a Toyota Aygo. The i10 looks even better value here, given that even the feeblest 1 litre 68 brake horsepower 5-door versions of these models can't be had for less than £10,000. Get yourself a C1 or a Peugeot 108 in 1.2 litre form and you're looking at having to find a premium of at least £1,200 over a comparable 1.2 litre i10. Are there other options in this segment? Well, not too many. You can broadly discount the Ford Ka, the Fiat 500 and the Vauxhall Adam, as they all only come with 3 doors, with the Fiat and the Vauxhall considerably more expensive too. A closer match is Renault's third generation Twingo, but that again will cost you a little more, as would a comparable 1.2 litre Nissan Micra or Mitsubishi Mirage. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is an i10 that you really want, then you're going to need to know what's included in the standard equipment tally. And the answer is a reasonable amount. All models come with daytime running lights, central locking, electric front windows, a trip computer, and a decent quality CD stereo with USB and aux-in connections. Now, as I've said, most buyers will opt to pay extra for air conditioning, and many will go further and get themselves the mid-range SE spec that also throws in power mirrors, electric rear windows and driver's seat height adjustment. Niceties like 14-inch alloy wheels, Bluetooth phone connectivity and front fog lights are, as you might expect, reserved for top-spec models. Not enough? Have a look at the options list. Now, on most city cars, this consists of floor mats, mud flaps and a paper bag to pop on your head so that friends won't spot you driving the thing. But this i10 has some genuinely useful extras to choose from. You can put alloy wheels onto the lower trim levels, and rear parking sensors are also offered. Although if you struggle parking an i10, you really ought to send your licence to the DVLA in Swansea. Other options available include the bright orange cabin trim you should probably avoid for the sake of resale value, or more usefully, cruise control with a speed limiter to help look after your licence in urban areas. Plus, you could consider the connectivity pack, which includes Bluetooth with voice recognition, rear speakers and steering wheel controls. There's also a winter pack with heated leather steering wheel and heated front seats. Safety is something HYUNDAI takes extremely seriously, and though only top-spec models get hill start assist and hazard warning lights that flash under heavy braking, otherwise there's little to take issue with. After all, even the entry-level i10 gets no fewer than 6 airbags, is fitted with the latest generation ESP stability control system, and includes tyre pressure monitoring and ISOFIX child seat fastenings. Now, if you're comparing rival cars spec for spec, look for stability control before you start thinking about stereos, alloy wheels or seat trims. Remember that you'll pay extra for ESP stability control on entry-level versions of the Seat Mii, the Skoda Citigo, the Ford Ka and Fiat's Panda and 500 models, which for me is pretty unacceptable in this day and age. Better perhaps to simply buy from a manufacturer with the right philosophy. As you might guess, it takes a lot to bet a HYUNDAI when it comes to cost of ownership. As you can tell from the sheer substance of this thing, the i10 proposition's about a whole lot more than just a 5-year warranty with a car thrown in for good measure. But there's no doubt that the comprehensive after-sales package does remain a major attraction for city car customers. It's a really good unlimited mileage deal that also includes annual vehicle health checks and roadside assistance to add peace of mind. After all, city driving is just about the toughest thing you can put a car through, with lots of starting, stopping, gear changing and routinely poor services to put the suspension through the mill. Economically, you need to know that it's not going to throw up any unpleasant surprises. Day-to-day running costs are as tiny as you might expect, though I do have to point out that they're not quite as good as those of the first generation model, to an extent that might even put you up a tax band. Blame an increase in weight for that. The 3-cylinder 1 litre variant is available either in a standard guise, which emits 108 grams per kilometre of CO2, or an eco-minded blue drive version, which trims that down to 98 grams if you really don't want to be paying for road tax. Step up to the 4-cylinder 1.2 litre car and you'll find the manual model emits a very reasonable 108 grams, but should you specify it with the automatic transmission, that rockets up to 142 grams per kilometre. Ouch! That'll add £120 a year to your road tax bills, which is something that you'll need to bear in mind. And fuel consumption? Well, HYUNDAI quotes a figure of 60.1 miles to the gallon for the 1 litre car, or 61.4 for the blue drive version that's also fitted with a standard stop-start system. The 1.2 litre variant doesn't do much worse, returning 57.6 miles to the gallon with a manual box. That inefficient automatic again puts a dampener on things, registering 45.6 miles to the gallon. But remember, those are Hyundai's claim figures. In our time with this car, we've averaged around 45 miles to the gallon. Go for that automatic and you might well see your average fuel consumption dip into the 30s, which isn't great for such a small car. Insurance groupings stand at 1A for the 1 litre model and 4A for the 1.2. Residual values are very class competitive too. The servicing costs are down thanks to the addition of features like a maintenance-free long life timing chain. Combine these factors with the frugal fuel economy and the tax savings that you'll make in ownership, and you'll emerge, according to industry experts CAP, with a class-leading pence per mile running cost figure of just 29p, a couple of pence better than a Volkswagen Up. In other words, the best city cars can also be the cheapest to run. City cars have evolved. These used to be models people went for because they had to. Now, so often, they're little runabouts customers own out of choice. For all the industry plaudits the first generation i10 received, it wasn't a car you'd ever feel especially joyful about owning. But, specified correctly, this second generation version might be. Here we've an A-segment contender that's everything it needs to be, and pretty much everything a model of this kind can be. As cheap, frugal, clean and practical as it was before, but now with greater quality and character thrown in alongside a more precise European feel. Other direct competitors can offer this too, but do your sums on the spec and you'll find that nearly all of them are more expensive. Which wouldn't be an issue if they were delivering lower running costs, stronger build quality or more interior space than this i10 can offer. But they're not. This Hyundai can now either match or beat its key rivals in all these areas, which means that if you're shopping in this segment, you have to consider it.